Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you're doing well, taking care of those closest to you. I hope you had a quality Thanksgiving. I hope that the conversation was light and that you were around people that bring you joy as a good, proper holiday should. I spent Thanksgiving in Brooklyn with my in-laws and family, and had a really nice time. Had a lot of really had some a lot of turkey and a lot of stuffing and pie. It was pretty excellent. Was able to navigate the day after Black Friday, having spent a number of years working retail on Black Friday. I'm thankfully at a place where I'm no longer in the trenches. But to anyone who listens, who still works Black Friday, I see you. I understand your pain, and I think you should be paid more and have to work the same hours that you usually do. That is personally what I think, and I hope that you're getting some rest, well-deserved rest after the weekend. Crazy weekend in World Cup news. I'll tell you this quick story because I know I'm not a sports podcast, but my from this weekend gives another weekend of like a lot of crazily unexpected results in the group stage, especially Morocco beating Belgium. But I caught the Argentina-Mexico game in Times Square at a soccer shop called Pele Soccer, which sells soccer jerseys, soccer shoes, and equipment, because I like to have jerseys and shirts from the various countries that I've visited and countries that I have friends in. And so I was able to catch the Argentina and Mexico game with, I would say, easily about 100 or so other people. They have a lot of Mexican fans, so I was very quietly enjoying the game in the back by the cash registers. But it was a game that Argentina had to win, and luckily they did. And if there's any doubt as to Lionel Messi's status as one of the greatest to ever play the game, he came through with a really beautiful goal out of really nowhere. So I'm very excited for my Argentinian friends that their World Cup hopes are still alive, and I hope that they can continue on into their final group stage match and continue to have a good run. I also was able to watch the United States-England 0-0 draw, which lots of people love to make fun of the 0-0 draw when it comes 0-0 draws when it comes to soccer. They love to make fun of soccer for that reason. But this USA-England match, despite no goals being scored, I was incredibly on the edge of my seat the whole time. USA produced a lot of chances, had a lot of great defense, and set themselves up to control their own destiny, as the sportscasters have been saying, going into their game against Iran on Tuesday, that they have to win in order to advance. So I am very excited to see what happens. These group stage matches have been anything but predictable. Every time I think I'm pretty sure I know what's going to happen, most of the time I'm not. And it's been exciting to watch. Not as exciting, and we definitely get into this a little bit in the episode, to warrant the tremendous human rights abuses and corruption that went into place for this tournament to actually happen in Qatar, where it is. I'm able to compartmentalize, but there's a lot of horrible decisions that happened that affected a lot of people very negatively. And I wish that didn't have to be the case. And maybe in 2026, when the World Cup's hosted by USA, Mexico, and Canada, there is maybe hopefully a little less of that. But that is the peril of the of FIFA and the World Cup. And leading into my and this leads into my episode today, because my guest on the show today is stand-up comedian Andy J Ritchie, who is a Edinburgh Scotland born comic who has lived all over the world. I met him this is going on like maybe almost close to think we're coming up on 7 years, 8 years, about almost 8 years ago now. I met him in Barcelona, Spain, when I was on holiday and was doing stand up in Barcelona. And Andy's a guy who's lived in a lot of different places, and I was very excited to get to talk to him about that, as well as the differences between stand up in the United States versus stand up in Europe, where interestingly enough, it seems like the two areas are continuing to kind of influence each other. So I'm seeing a lot more melding of styles. It sounds like after I talked to Andy, and Andy, I last saw when I was in Edinburgh a couple of years ago, actually during the World Cup in Russia. We met up a couple of times and were able to hang out. And he's a very smart guy. He's a very funny guy, and I love getting to chat with Andy. He's sort of my go-to guy for Scotland and for European comics. So I really was excited to get to catch up with my friend Andy, who, if you enjoy listening to this, has a podcast that you can get everywhere that you listen to your music regarding movies. I'll have a link for it in the description. And this was a really good time getting to catch up with an old friend and a comedy buddy. So I hope you guys enjoy listening to this. And if you do and are curious to listen to more, you can go to awesomedisaster.com for links to everything related to me and what I do. And I appreciate you all being here. And if this is your first time, I appreciate you checking out this particular episode. So let's get into it and talk to comedian Andy J Ritchie. I think the last time we talked, I haven't seen you for a few years, but I think the last time we talked was when I happened to be in Scotland during the 2018 World Cup for a few days.
Was that during the World Cup? Oh my God.
Yeah, I remember it vividly because my now wife, who I think you might remember, Chelsea, was at a conference in Liverpool, and so I decided to go up to see Edinburgh for a couple of days. And I was staying at a hostel and watching the games in like the common room of the hostel. And then I remember running into some during Spain against Portugal, like just going to a pub and running into a bunch of like random English soccer fans, and they're like, "Oh, you're American and you like football? That's cool." And you took me to Nando's. That was like the like UK like Scotland thing that you said that I had to do.
I did so much for you. I feel, I definitely held up my end of the bargain there.
It was a good time. Have you been watching this World Cup any?
No, I haven't. Well, first of all, I'm Scottish, and my country
know,
didn't qualify for the competition. And, obviously there's a big sort of dark cloud over this World Cup, mainly because of all the workers who were killed, et cetera, and like the kind of gay rights elements. But I would say more than that, it's just a World Cup in the month of November. It just feels weird. It just feels wrong.
Yeah, it's odd. Like it totally, like I remember, like it kind of disrupts the flow of all of the like the Scottish Premiership, the English Premiership. It's unusual, and then again, certainly with the innumerable human rights violations that and corruption that led into it even happening in the first place. I am, I guess, able to compartmentalize that side of my brain once the game starts, which is kind of messed up.
No, I think that's fine. That's fine. You're supporting your nation. I was supporting the USA as well, obviously, because you were playing against England.
Yes.
Unfortunately, you only drew.
I know. I know. I was hoping I felt like we could have won that game.
Apparently it was very close. Again, I haven't watched a single game of this World Cup. I've just completely given up on it. Maybe later on, maybe towards the end, I'll start watching a few games.
Yeah, well, it's and not that I'm like a sports or tactical expert when it comes to football, but I feel like this group stage has been wildly unpredictable. Argentina lost to Saudi Arabia 2-1 in a group stage, and then Japan beat Germany 2-1, and then I just watched Morocco beat Belgium, and then Costa Rica got annihilated by Spain like 7-0 in their first match. So lots of the teams you would expect to be like dominating and already have advanced, that's not happening. Ecuador drew the Netherlands.
I have no idea why it's gone so, so weird. I don't know if it's just because these teams are not used to playing in in this country, in this heat, at this time of year or something, but it is very, very strange. It does feel very up and down.
Yeah, I think there's certainly could be like some tactical like region advantage. Same way like
Mm.
I always imagine like if you were like in the United States, say if you play for a team in like Los Angeles and you have like sunshine and like nice weather all year round, and then you have to go to like Cleveland in the dead of winter where it's cold and sad, and I imagine you might be at a slight disadvantage then.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, for Scottish players playing in anything like 20 degrees Celsius, I have no idea what that is in Fahrenheit because, yeah, obviously I think Fahrenheit is wrong. But yeah, so
Right.
like just playing in like a mild temperature for Scottish players, they start sweating. They have to take breaks. They're like, oh, I need my water bottle. So I mean, the idea of Scottish players going and playing in like somewhere like this, Qatar,
Yeah.
it's just as well we never made it.
You think
It would
yeah,
have ruined
the,
us.
you think the whole team would just melt. 20 degrees Celsius is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So that
Which is pretty poor, right?
I would consider that. I would put on a light jacket for that if that makes any sense.
It does.
I like this sort of like call like this will be one of the because I last podcast I had a musician from Sweden on, and it's just fun the little like slight differences when you're podcasting with someone who's got a completely different like life experience
Right.
from you. But I remember us meeting very well, Andy, because and I would love to talk to you a little bit about this. A few years ago, I was in Barcelona and looking
Mhm.
to do some stand up shows, and that's when I ran into you because there's like a very good like English language stand up show that was run in Barcelona, and that's where we met.
Yeah, things have moved on a huge amount since then.
Yeah,
Because I think when was that? Was that like 2015 or something? Or
yeah. It was easily like 20. Yeah, because it was before the really bad U.S. election in 2016. uh, and I had just met my now wife, so it was still pretty on in our relationship. So yeah, I think that was like 2015, like April 2015.
because I think back then there was probably like one English language stand-up comedy show a week, maybe two,
Mm-hmm.
maybe one show and one open mic. And now there's a full-time English language club that runs shows every night of the week, multiple shows every night of the week.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's like things have definitely moved on. But yeah,
Wow.
I do remember meeting you, and that was in a really, really nice bar, which isn't there anymore, or certainly doesn't host comedy shows anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lovely little venue.
Yeah, that I remember that place vividly because that's kind of the cool thing about like even like DIY shows or I found in Europe is that you'll have them in these like really cool, funky venues that have a ton of history to them, and compared to like what I'm usually doing in New York, which is like, okay, we've got the basement of a pizza shop on a Tuesday, or we've got the basement of a sex toy store. Lots of basements when it comes to doing comedy in New York City.
But then, I mean, this is the thing about Europe. Like, we're basically falling over history all the time. History doesn't mean anything to us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, because we're just like, yeah, this room is 500 years old, and everyone is just like, yeah, obviously, everything is 500 years old here. We don't care whatsoever. It's only people from, let's say, newer countries
Hmm.
who actually care about that.
Yeah. Whereas I feel like over here, like occasionally we preserve things, but most of the time it just kind of gets paved over, and it's like one of my favorite things in that particular instance is my old neighborhood in Queens. I lived in a neighborhood called Woodside, and there was a Wendy's near there that used to have like a boxing arena.
Oh wow, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's like a little plaque, and I'm just thinking about like all of the time and effort that went into everybody who boxed at that spot, and how popular it probably was back in the day. And now it's a Wendy's.
Wow, there you go.
That's funny to me. That's funny to me. So you think like Europeans are like spoiled with their access to like, oh, that's just Stonehenge, or that's just like it's just so common that you end up taking it for granted.
Well, I mean, I feel that way about like being Scottish. I never look at my family tree. I've never dug into it. But my
Hmm.
family, like, I'm from Edinburgh, which is in the south of the country. My parents are
Yeah.
from like Aberdeenshire, like so kind of northeast of the country, probably going back generations. So like I'm as Scottish as I mean, obviously, some people some people might hear my voice and go, "Well, you don't really sound very Scottish." But like, I'm kind, yeah, that's just because I've lived in,
I can
I've lived in
understand the words you're
yeah,
saying. How
exactly,
can
yeah,
you be
that's it.
Scottish?
But like, I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. My family was, Scottish for generations, and I just couldn't care less. It just is meaningless.
Hmm.
Whereas I think someone from the US is maybe like trying to sort of find their roots and claim something. And I think if you come from somewhere like Scotland, you're just like, yeah, I mean, I'm Scottish. It's something I'm trying to get away from, if anything.
Uh,
It's not something I'm hugely proud of.
sure, sure. Well, because and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like even amongst like the UK, Scotland is sort of like the like kind of like runt of the litter almost. Like everybody likes to make fun of Scotland, like compared to
Oh, this
like
sounds like
UK, Ireland, and Wales.
these sound like fighting words. Will it's here? I think you're lucky you're on the other side of
I mean,
the pond.
I love Scott. I loved my time. I love in brew. I love pies. I love Nando. I love all of my
Oh my god!
experience.
See, you're more Scottish than I am.
I loved my entire experience in Edinburgh, and when I eventually do Fringe, we're gonna hang out again in person. But so you grew up in Edinburgh,
Yeah, yep.
and
I mean, I was there. So I was there from when I was born till 17. I went away to England for
mhm.
university. I was in Newcastle in the north of England. And
Okay.
then, but most of my adult life, I've lived in other countries. I mean, I've lived in Spain for 9 years. I'm in Barcelona right now.
Oh, you are.
Yeah, I lived in Portugal, Italy, Japan, France.
That's
It's kind
that
of
that's really cool. This is something I am very envious of when it comes to folks who are born in Europe, because you can just like, oh, I think I'll go live in Spain for a while, see what that's about. Oh, I think I'll take the tube to Paris for the weekend. Like compared to like, oh well, I could take the Metro North to Connecticut, or I
that
can go.
sounds okay too.
I mean, New Haven's got really good pizza, but then also I knew so does New York. So what is I'm curious what your experience like growing up in Edinburgh is like, because as as an outsider going there, like all I see is just like, again, all of these buildings look like they're 100 years old, and they could be castles. And I'm of course I've been there around the time of like the World Cup and Fringe, where it's like just a massive influx of people. What is like what was like your life like growing up? What was the vibe in your home?
I don't know about in my home. Like, um, both of my parents are kind of in their late 70s, early 80s, so they're definitely old school.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'm 41, so I'm not exactly young myself, but like I grew up the Edinburgh I grew up in is sort of the train spotting years.
Mhm.
I mean, I saw the edges of that, like heroin addicts. At the time when I grew up, Edinburgh was like the HIV capital of Europe or something.
Oh, really?
I don't think that was like, that wasn't something they were proud of or anything, but
Yeah, I can imagine that. Was there like, so if there's like a big drug traffic and drug problem, is there like high crime that goes along with that?
There was. I think like all of this is pretty much gone away. I think people of that generation died off, and
Mm-hmm.
then what's happened since then is now Edinburgh's been like completely gentrified, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a totally different place. And you know, it's one of those places where people visit and they're like, "This is beautiful. It's old buildings. Every like you said, everything looks like a castle."
Yeah.
So I think especially like during COVID, people moved up from London because it was cheaper,
Mm-hmm.
and now the rents have gone up massively, which is
Right.
normal. And
Uh-huh. Sure.
yeah, but like growing up, I would say it certainly wasn't a friendly place. It was a kind of place where people didn't say hi to each other on the street,
Sure.
and you would try not to make eye contact with people. Like when I was like a teenager and I was walking down the street, I was trying not to make eye contact with like other boys or groups of boys, because
Mm-hmm.
that would have been like, you know, saying I want to fight you.
Ah, I see. So the idea is just kind of be like non-confrontational looking at all times.
Pretty much, pretty much. But saying that though, I
Goodness.
mean, we we obviously don't have guns. We never had guns. I guess there was a bit of knife crime, but the
Mm-hmm.
worst that was ever going to happen to you really was that someone was going to punch you in the face. So it wasn't actually that bad. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I understand that completely because you can get up from getting punched in the face most of the time.
I
Um,
like to think so. Yeah.
yeah, whereas whereas where I live, whereas I live, it's just like raining bullets, and we're never going to do anything about it. Which is infuriating.
See, well, so, I mean, was that something that like when you were growing up? Was that something you ever thought about? Like, were you worried about getting shot or seeing a gun or, you know, hearing a gun go off? Is that something that actually happened?
n-
Because I think that's like the European view of the US, where we're just, you know, I've been to the US various times, and every
mhm.
single time when I'm thinking about going, I'm like, someone could just pull out a gun if they wanted to and shoot me. But as soon as I get there, I just stop thinking about it. I'm like, it's a normal place. It's completely fine. So I just wonder, like, when you were younger, like, were you thinking about that or
Um, Probably not in the way I do now because to be honest, like my dad's always been a gun owner and a gun enthusiast. So I was
respect?
I always grew up with guns in the house and around guns. I had a BB gun when I was a kid. But if I can to give you like the kind of more nuanced perspective, my dad is the kind of gun owner that you would want a gun owner to be.
Right.
He collects them because he's into them and he likes them. He keeps them locked. He keeps them locked up. He cleans them when he goes hunting or when he goes to a firing range. He's not just with the exception of when I was growing up and had a BB gun like and would shoot at a cardboard box, but he's always like very much had been like making sure that I knew what proper gun safety was and how to prevent getting myself hurt from guns. So that was more because I also grew up in like the middle of nowhere. I didn't grow up in a big
Mm.
city. So that's more of the experience and when people say like the culture around like guns, the kind of the culture around it in a more rural country setting is very different in a major city where gun becomes synonymous with violent crime, if that
I
makes
mean,
sense.
this kind of sounds like you were just waiting for something to happen. So you're kind of thinking like, just wait. We'll just wait because when my dad gets here, he's gonna show you all.
Oh, I was never that people because I was tall, I people always wanted to try to provoke me in the fighting, but you could push me as super far and I had super zen patience. I was never gonna retaliate. That was kind of my experience. When you were a kid, what kind of kid were you? Were you like a were you an artsy kid growing up or did that come later?
Not really. I remember doing a play in the Fringe when I was a kid,
Uh-huh.
and it was absolutely awful. It was like it was set in World War II. It was called The Vackies, and it's about like a group of kids who had to leave London in the Second World War and go to like rural Somerset, which is in like the southwest of England.
Mhm.
And I was just like I was one of the rural Somerset kids who was kind of in the chorus line type thing, singing songs, and I had about 3 lines,
Uh-huh.
and it was awful. Every single night, I was like, "Oh, fuck, it's my turn. It's now I have to say my line. I have to say my first line."
Right.
And I really didn't look forward to it. But I guess at a certain point, I mean, I guess like towards the end of the run, I started getting into it and going like, you know what, this could actually be all right. But um, yeah, acting is never my thing. It was never
Uh-huh.
my thing whatsoever. And for stand up, I got into stand up, I guess, because like I was a huge fan of comedy, and I guess I came into it at a time when a lot of people were, because it was really opened up. I mean, I think I started in 2014, so
Mhm.
it was a time where there were a ton of podcasts where people were explaining like, "Hey, this is what comedy is. This is, if you want to do it, this is what you have to do.
Mhm.
You just need to write a joke and go to this place." So it really kind of opened it up, to me. And yeah, I think
Uh-huh.
nowadays, I think it's been opened up even further.
Oh yeah, like with the amount of stuff that you can do online and or on TikTok, like you don't even have to physically go to a place anymore
Right.
if you don't want to. So when you were young and into comedy, what was the comedy that you were really interested in when you were younger? Was it American stuff? Was there stuff in the UK? Because I have no sense of the comedy scene in the UK other than it seems like there's a lot of like panel shows that set you up to be funny.
Yeah, all those panel show comics tend to be managed by the same management company.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a sort of base level
Sounds
where,
about right.
yeah, if you get, this, if you join this agency, you're pretty much guaranteed to be on X number of shows. And they really push those people forward, which is fine. I think, a lot of them are very funny.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think growing up, we definitely got a lot of comedy from the US. The UK scene at the time, I mean, I remember the first gig I remember seeing in the Fringe was like a huge theater show. I went to see a comic called Rory Bremner, who I imagine no one in the US has ever heard of before.
Uh-huh.
But it was mostly politics he was talking about. And I think I was about 16 at the time, and I remember
Mm-hmm.
going like, "Yes, this is funny. This is what comedy is." But I think I was more into quite alty stuff when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
it was already like, and that was mostly British, and I think it was a lot of people being really meta and like breaking joke structures. Because
okay.
I never really vibed with the like set up punchline, bang bang bang,
Mm-hmm.
normal stand up comedy. I've never really been a huge fan of that.
Yeah, the sort of like stuff you'd see on like the stuff you would see on like Evening at the Improv, like back in the day in the like 80s or early 90s. That's sort of like more like, I guess, normal, quote unquote,
Yeah,
stand up
and I
comedy,
mean,
for lack of a better
see.
word.
I guess I'm like when you talk about that, it just makes me think of something like the Simpsons, or because that's probably how we viewed that kind of thing, was when it was being satirized. I just sort of made fun of, like, white white people drive like this and
Uh
black
huh.
people drive like this, and it was all like, I mean, that's kind of how I view that. That's how I saw that stand up, was
Mm-hmm.
already through like a form of satire, kind of making fun of it. But I
Sure,
mean, I
sure.
remember like in the 90s, I remember watching like Chris Rock,
Mm-hmm.
Dave Chappelle. I can't remember who else I was really into, but I mean, yeah, there was definitely a wide range.
Yeah, Chris Rock, I think, especially if you had not seen him before, I think those
Mm,
90s specials like Bigger and Blacker and Bring the Pain,
yeah.
I remember seeing those early when I got into stand up as well and being very like just entranced by it. Like the fact of like the well articulated thought and point of view and the hilarious jokes, like just super like joke after joke after joke. That was really cool because I remember being kind of I think I'm pretty sure my first exposure to stand up comedy was Jeff Foxworthy
Okay.
and like more long form stuff or like comics that talk about their families. And I remember like finding that to me was I couldn't relate to that because I was a teenager at the time. So not unlike you, I gravitated towards kind of more surreal out there comedians, but I also liked one-liners because to me the
Okay.
idea of a one-liner at the time was not this like old school like Catskills Henny Youngman take my wife please
Take
thing.
my wife, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, the one-liner was like Dimitri Martin or Mitch Hedberg,
Sure.
or Stephen Wright, the odd, surreal thought. And then I was like, oh, I have odd thoughts all the time because I live in a part of the United States where there's nothing to do and I don't have a car. So all I do is just hang out and think of and them in my head all day. So that was eye-opening to me was the like surreal one-liner. Um, but it sounds like the UK scene at the time, like the mainstream was inherently political, like the bigger comics at the time.
We have like a kind of theater tradition running through stand up, whereas I think because I mean I guess it like stand up is a US art form is something I've always heard people say. I have no idea what the actual origin is, but I've always heard people
Right.
say it started in the US. So I feel like our interpretation of it is probably I don't know, goes back to like Shakespearean times or something. Like everything else, it's super old. But I think
Mm-hmm.
it comes with like a real theatrical element where people are like really want to play with the form and break things down, and then there's like an element of pathos. I mean, you talked about going to the Fringe, the Edinburgh Festival. I
Mm-hmm.
think shows there in general, most people who run their 1 hour show, it could be changing a little bit now with more of the sort of Netflix influence of kind of maybe shifting away from this and moving more towards a kind of US stand up form. But
Mm-hmm.
like what these 1 hour Fringe shows have been for years and years and years is someone the famous the sort of like stereotype is talking about your dead dad. It's your 1 hour show about how like this is the show about my dad who died last year type thing. And
Uh-huh.
there's always there you have to wow them in the end. There's like I said, there's this big like theatrical element to it. And I think that's always been the case for us. It's I think when US comics come to the UK, they tend to do like joke, 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 just go there like boom through a very, very tight set. And most
Mm-hmm.
British people are like, oh my God, is it even possible to think and speak that fast?
Right. Like I
Because
haven't seen
that's
that
so weird
before.
to us. We're like, everyone is extremely loose because they're not practicing enough, probably, and not
Uh-huh.
writing enough. But they're just like, hey, if I keep people interested and there's a little theatrical twist, then yeah, that's all I need. That's all we need here.
Right. That makes total sense. Like there because I have always thought that US stand up grew out of vaudeville to a certain degree.
Mm.
Um and then there was this big boom in the 80s with the comedy club, and I feel like the comedy club got adopted in the UK later on. But yeah, you have all
Yeah,
these
that's
like
probably right.
where you'll go and see like 8 or 9 comics do like 10 or 15 minutes each, and it's like bam 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 bam. Um and it's interesting that you say that the US style is starting to influence more the UK side, because I feel, and especially I feel like after Nanette was so big
Mm.
and polarizing to a lot of people in the US, I feel like that was a lot of American comedy fans' introduction to the concept of the Edinburgh show,
Right.
the sort of like again like you were saying, like the spotlight, you're smoking a fake cigarette. If it was Wednesday in my house, that meant Dad was drinking, and in my house every day was Wednesday, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, because I think that show was really normal for us. There's nothing I think anyone who'd followed comedy at all, like the UK circuit and Edinburgh Fringe, there's nothing unusual about someone coming on stage and spending an hour that's really dark and saying like, I don't want to be a comedian and I don't want to make fun of myself anymore, and this horrible thing happened to me and I'm going to try to kind of make it funny, but mostly I'm just going to talk about this horrible, horrible thing so that you can understand that horrible things happen. There's nothing unusual about that for us.
Yeah. Whereas I feel like United States audience was like, this isn't comedy. comedy is I laugh at least every couple of seconds.
Right.
But I love that it that show, excuse me, kind of opened up the idea and the form of what comedy could be, because I feel like I also love Mike Birbiglia, and that sort of kind of like storytelling tradition, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've heard of The Moth over here, which is a storytelling
Sure.
show.
Yeah.
That's pretty, that I really enjoy. I've done a handful of times. It's this. I sort of like the kind of intermingling, because I love nightclub stand up too. Like Dave Attell, I love
Mm-hmm.
going and seeing like rapid fire jokes and jokes and jokes. And then like another comic that I know almost all American comics like idolize from the UK is Stuart Lee.
Yeah.
Like
He was. I mean, he was huge for me when I was growing up. He had a TV show with another comic called Richard Herring. It was called Fist of Fun. And then they had another show called This Morning with Richard Not Judy. And their first show was on like maybe a Friday night, like 8 or 9 p.m. But the other show was on like a Sunday lunchtime. And they used
really,
to really push it. Yeah, they had some wild things going on for, a Sunday
oh
lunch.
wild,
But I mean, like, yeah, that definitely formed a big part of me wanting to sort of like play with joke structures and break everything.
yeah,
Just because, yeah, I saw that probably too young. That was very, very formative for me.
I remember seeing him for the first time, and that was in my heavy like Bill Hicks, Lewis Black era. So I was like, oh my god, this guy is like what they're doing, but like refined to like the like most cutting satire. Like and
Yeah.
and it was the first time I remember one joke of Stuart Lee's. I remember, I can't remember what special it's from, but I think he's talking with a cab driver, like a homophobic cab driver, and he's talking about the Greek expression of homosexuality as being like the purest form of love that there is. And then the cab driver goes, and this became really prescient in the US in the last few years. Well, you can just win any argument with facts, can't you?
Yeah, that's his. I think that's like a 2003 special. It's called like stand up comedian, I think.
Yeah,
I'm sure you can find that on YouTube probably.
Mm-hmm. And so when you were young, did you think that you were going to be a stand-up?
No, because I felt like I had nothing to say, which is weird because I've always thought about it. It's not like I didn't think I could write a joke, but I thought like I had nothing to say because like I said, I grew up in this thing where I felt like if you have to have something to say, there has to be some great point.
That's a very humble worldview, and I really appreciate that about you, Andy.
Yeah,
So
okay, I'll take it.
you thought like you didn't have like anything inherently like profound or influential.
Yeah,
to say.
basically, I was like, it's already been done, and I'm not. But I think that's weird because I guess I was viewing it through the lens, like you said. I mean, you've already mentioned Hicks. I was into Bill Hicks. I was into Doug Stanhope as well,
Yeah,
and
Doug's great.
other people like that, and just kind of going like, well, obviously, you need to make sort of, you need to satirize things and then make this great overarching point. You need to be treating society's ills. Whereas, obviously, I would never do anything.
Right.
I haven't done anything like that.
Yeah.
So
I know what you mean. Because every time I try to get political, it doesn't really work. So, but as I've gotten older, I have found the value in my comedy being like the valve that sort of like lets the steam out, so to speak, being kind of like the break from that. Because I am at my best when I'm being personal and when I'm being just silly. So I found the value in that kind of like pump the brakes. Because if it's just like darkness all the time, like you fucking kill yourself if it's
true.
Just darkness like that all the time.
What I was just gonna ask, like, so if you go to like a New York club now, what are most people talking about? Like, what's like a typical joke topic these days?
Typical joke top. Well, pandemic is still pretty much like a baseline for what a group for what a group experiences. So you're still I'm still seeing a lot of that when I go into clubs nowadays, and when I do shows. Um, and then there's like little like kind of cultural like milestones or pop culture things that we can get around. So I'm seeing a lot of topical stuff in the clubs now.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been to a UK comedy club for years. I've got no idea, but I imagine it's quite similar. People are probably talking about COVID, Tinder,
Mm-hmm.
Netflix, I assume.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Current events, a
Yeah.
lot of that stuff. When you were growing up, how long has the Stand been in Edinburgh? Has that always been there, or was that
Ooh.
is that a relatively new
That was
thing?
opened in the 90s. So there's 3 clubs. There's one in Edinburgh, one in Glasgow, and one in Newcastle.
Okay,
It's co-owned by a bunch of Scottish stand-ups.
interesting. Okay,
Well, the main owner is a guy called Tommy Shepherd, who is a member of Parliament.
really?
Yeah, which is kind of weird. And then some of the other owners, Frankie Boyle's one of the co-owners. I'm
Uh
not
huh.
sure if you've heard of him, but
Yeah,
he's
I know
a
that name.
famous Scottish comedian. Yeah, and some other guys. But yeah, that was. I mean, I used to go there every week when I was about 18, 19, probably.
Wow. So a politician owns a comedy club. That's interesting to me. And what was and the form of the UK club show uh different than the US, cuz I've always heard that it's like you see like fewer comics, but like they all do like 20 minutes usually.
Yeah, like I mean, like a weekend show at the Stand is probably that. There's your host,
Mhm.
then you've got an opener maybe does 15, and then a middle does maybe 20, 25 or something, and
Mhm.
then your headliner does whatever, maybe 40 or something like that.
Oh,
But there's
okay.
also breaks. So, because
Right.
this is the main difference is we don't do waiter waitress. Like for us, you take breaks so that people can go to the bar because we still have like a bar culture where you order at the bar. So that's always the weirdest thing for us, I think, is when we see US clubs and I hear like US comics are talking about like I don't want to do a check spot, and for
Right.
people in the UK, we're like, you get a waitress brings you a check, like brings you a bill for your drinks at the like during the show. That's insane. That's
Yes.
mad.
It is because it's and those are the hardest spots. Like that's why
Right. That's what everyone says. Yeah.
like when I first moved to New York, I would be those were the spots I would get at clubs, and I would be happy to get them because it's like, oh, okay, real comedy club. And then also, the joke is good if you can get people to laugh while they're like experiencing the sticker shock of how much drinks are at most clubs.
Yeah.
Um, so, but I like that system more because it leaves the show uninterrupted.
Yeah.
Like you can focus more on the show, and then there's like, okay, now we're gonna get drinks and go back. Like I like that system a lot more actually.
I mean, everything about UK culture is fueled by drinking. There's not really anything
Right.
that's actually done sober. And
Mm-hmm.
comedy is like an alcohol sales business, and we've decided that the best way to do that is let people get as drunk as possible before the show, and then take a couple of breaks during the show where people buy like multiple drinks so that they can drink. And then people don't really move around. There's no waiter or waitress walking around. That must be so off-putting. Like in a show, at a shows in a UK club, no one is walking around. There's breaks where you can go to the toilet. The only time
Mm-hmm.
someone goes to the toilet is if they're like about to piss themselves.
Right.
Apart from that, like it's just there's someone on stage doing jokes and there's no noise. And there should be, I mean, obviously laughter, hopefully, but
Mm-hmm.
there should be no one like playing with glasses at the bar or anything like that. There should be no like insane off-putting background noises, and people shouldn't be talking.
I agree. That's that theater tradition. I feel like there's this kind of like respect for the stage that you folks have that I don't know quite exists here because, like, again, alcohol sales business. So alcohol number one, or you'll love this concept. When I was starting doing stand up in Baltimore, I would occasionally do spots at a place called the Baltimore Comedy Factory, and
Nice.
their thing to get people through the door were these $20 all you can drink tickets. So you show up with one of these, you get $20. They pack people into this room, and then they just pour it down their throats for the duration of the show, as much as you can drink. So that's a real like for me when I was newer, that was a real like trial by fire because I was like, all right, I got to go up, I got to be super tight, I got to give nobody any room to interrupt, like just go bam, 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 bam. But I love this kind of like theater tradition you have. Okay, so you go to Newcastle at when you're 17 for university. What did you study?
Yeah. I studied government and European Union studies.
This kind of oddly makes sense for what I think we're talking about. Government and UK studies. So what was
Yeah, wait. That was government and European Union studies.
European Union studies?
Yeah. Which the UK is hasn't been a part of
Has
now
not been a part of.
Yeah, for some period.
So does that make your that probably makes your education more specific to the rest of the EU now that since Brexit.
I think that's a very positive spin. I would say it's largely worthless, but it was largely worthless right after I did it. So I chose that course because I was like, I'm supposed to go to university. Like that's what you're supposed to do. I was finished high school. I'm supposed to go to university because that's what you do.
Right.
But also when I went to university, because this is a long time ago. This is over 20 years ago now since I started. So it was really cheap because we always heard stories of like US colleges charging people thousands and thousands of dollars. I think when I went to university, 1 year probably cost the equivalent of like $3,000, $2,000 maybe.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it was nothing. It didn't really cost anything. So I was like, you know what, I'll just go and do some of that. And the third year of my course was a year in France. That was a huge reason why I did it because I basically thought I'm going to get a year's holiday in France. And I did have a year's holiday in France. It was one of the best years of my life.
Oh,
so.
that sounds truly spectacular. Where in France was it?
It was Lyon.
Oh, excellent. I haven't been to Lyon. I've been to Paris and Cannes. But where is Lyon in the south?
It's in the southeast. Yeah, it's towards Switzerland. I was there the first year that the football team won the French league.
Oh, wow.
It was like 2001, 2002. Yeah, it was great. They had great players, and obviously there was like a massive celebration.
That's very cool. That's always fun to be in the kind of center of that. I love stuff like that. I was in Buenos Aires when Boca Juniors won the league, and I had to walk through like just a huge carnival celebration, and I'm just glad that I was wearing blue and yellow that day. That's wild. And then you've also and so you do this your holiday in France. That sounds incredible. And while you're at university, stand up is still not on the radar for you, or when did you start?
No, I mean I started when I was like 32 or something. Yeah, I mean I started like 2014. I think for like in my 20s, I looked at it as like, oh yeah, that would be a good thing to do. But I was always living in places where there was no stand up. I mean, I spent a lot of time living in sort of like small town Spain, and there wasn't really anything. There was nothing in English going on.
Sure.
Yeah, I didn't really have the chance.
And did you kind of have this sort of, because I would love to talk about your experiences in some of these countries you've lived in. What was sort of compelling you to go? Did you just sort of have this sort of like wanderlust, or was it like a curiosity? Were you like chasing somebody? Like what was compelling you to country hop like this?
Yeah, I was just running away mostly. No, I think like because you're speaking about the difference between Europe and the US. I think this is the benefit of like universal healthcare and there's not like we don't have a great pressure. There's no huge. Maybe it's changing a little bit now because things are sort of falling apart. I think our health system, is starting to sort of turn to shit. But we never really had that great pressure to be like, you need to earn a ton of money when you're young, or you're already worried you're paying into whatever it's called your 401k, and you're like, I need to
Hmm.
get insurance and et cetera, et cetera. In Europe, it's much more acceptable to just be a bum.
Uh-huh.
And there's we have that kind of we obviously we have like a socialist history,
Right.
and we can just kind of go and do what we want. So I just had freedom basically. I had freedom to go and live in some other country, and I just went, well, yeah, why not? I'll pay for that further down the line when I don't have a pension, I can never own property, et cetera, et cetera. That's when I'll pay for it. So I might as well just, have fun.
Yeah, stack some good memories for
Yeah.
when you're flashing back that last moment. You're just like, oh man, I did some really cool things. Where did you live in Japan? I always like talking about Japan when I can on the show.
I lived in Tokyo for about 2 years.
And how'd you like that?
I mean, I moved there when I was 21, I think the first time. I've lived there a few times, mostly for like 3 to 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
I was there for a year at first, and I was 21 years old, and it blew me away. I remember,
Uh-huh.
I remember getting like like a kind of phone card calling card thing. This is like 2003. I remember calling my family and just being sort of standing in a phone box in the street, just going
Uh-huh.
like, "It's so different." You just can't
Right.
imagine how different it is. But it definitely blew my mind. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't really been I don't think I experienced anything else like that really, because I think it was that again was like another formative thing to go somewhere like that when I was 21 was just like, whoa.
Yeah. Oh
But
my God.
it's obviously like a really strict culture, and it's hard to fit in, I would say.
Yeah, I've heard, especially like if you're an outsider, sometimes some parts of Japan can be a little less welcoming. My experience personally, every in Tokyo is like Japanese people are like the nicest people I've ever met.
Yeah.
Super patient, very like neat, very much like want to help you if you need assistance with something, like super respectful. So I enjoy all of those aspects of it. I've watched a couple of like the street food series on Netflix. I've heard it gets
Okay.
like, yeah, and I've also heard like Japan at night is where things like cut loose a little bit, like culturally. That's where you see like that's where you'll see like the super like straight laced businessman that like
Yeah.
goes that
There's
like
a
goes.
if you want to see something of that, there's a really good Instagram account called Shibuya Meltdown.
Oh, I'm
uh,
definitely following that.
and so it's basically it's like what you're saying. They have that culture obviously where like no one should go home earlier than the boss. Like if the boss is going to stay and work until 2 a.m., you need to stay there.
Yeah.
And then further than that, like everyone has to go out drinking together, and you can't be the first to leave. So people just get beyond wasted, and you'll just see them in suits, just like lying
Uh-huh.
on a metro car floor, just absolutely ruined.
Amazing.
So
That's
yeah, if you
why.
check out that, yeah, you can find a lot of videos there.
Oh, Shibuya Meltdown. I'm definitely checking that out. That makes sense. Well, because I remember like when you go into like Family Mart or 7-Eleven in Tokyo, lots of times you'll find like dress shirts for sale, and that makes
Yeah.
total sense because if you've been out all night and didn't get to go home, and you just like wake up on a bench and you're like, oh, well, it's 7 a.m. I got to be in the office in an hour. All right, let me just get throw that away and then get the new shirt.
Yep, I have definitely done that.
Oh, nice.
I mean, I don't remember when, but I've 100% gone into like a 24-hour store and just gone like, okay, I need to get a new shirt.
That's hilarious.
Stuck
Like
it on then and there.
amazing. And you lived in France as well, other than your holiday.
Nah, just there. Yeah, holiday. I was technically I was studying at
Oh, I know.
university.
I know you. I know
No,
you
no.
were studying.
But yeah, that was we had fun. We had fun. No, that was the only time I lived in France. After that, I mean, I lived in Portugal. I was in Lisbon.
Hmm.
In Spain, I've lived in Vigo, Madrid, Almeria, Barcelona. I lived in the north of Italy next to Milan. during COVID.
Oh,
And
that's not a bad place to spend COVID.
Well, it's kind of like it's next to where most of the people died. You know, when you saw images of Italy from
Uh-huh.
February 2020, it was
Right.
but like I was living in that area, but I went there after.
Ah,
So there was
gotcha.
actually more space, you know, if anything.
Right. Oh man, that's got to be really heavy.
It was very strange because you would be talking to people and they would, you know, they would say like my uncle died, or like
Mhm.
there's some small towns, kind of small mountain towns where entire streets of people died.
That's insane.
I don't know what was going on at that point. I don't know if it was stronger then, because that was just when I think someone came back. There was a fashion show in Milan in February 2020, and people came over from China, or some fashion designers had been in China and came back to Italy,
Mhm.
and they went back to like a couple of like small towns, and just devastated these places.
Oh yeah. Well, you cuz you got to remember like the vaccine is not even an idea at this point. We still
No,
don't
no, no.
even
This was very much like the start for
yeah.
Europe anyway.
Yeah, and like I forgot about this because we didn't even really know for the longest time we were thinking it spread on surfaces before realizing it was
Oh yeah.
mostly respiratory and like the whole don't touch your face thing. I remember like they didn't put the mask requirements in until I think in the US in New York at least until May. So I remember like at least going through the initial lockdown and masks weren't a thing and my wife would like go venture out very rarely to like once things reopened to like get us food and she said it was eerie how quiet
Yeah.
New York was and I'm sure you might remember there was the hospital there's a hospital in Queens that literally could not uh didn't have capacity for the number of people who were dying so there was the big refrigerated truck
Right, right.
of dead bodies outside like that was that was an insane time. I don't know how you navigated that early part of the pandemic where it genuinely seemed like the world could end. I don't know if I just turned my brain off and threw myself into this. How did you navigate that?
I mean, I was in Scotland at the time, so you know, I think that's a common feeling in Scotland. You're like, I think the world's about to end.
Uh
That's just generally living in Scotland.
huh.
No, I mean, yeah, the start was. I remember at the start being like, I might because I was planning on go. I was supposed to fly to Tokyo on. I was going to go back and work there. I think it was like March the 27th, 2020.
hmm
So I was back visiting my parents in
Okay.
Edinburgh,
Uh huh.
and I was like, if I don't get on this flight, I might be stuck. Like I might be stuck there here, and unfortunately, my flight got cancelled,
Uh huh.
and like I basically got trapped for about 3 months or something. So. Yeah, at the time I was like, "This is not very good. I'm not really enjoying this very much." Because
Right.
I was thinking about getting back on the road and you know having fun, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it wasn't. It certainly wasn't great.
Oh wow. That's a sitcom. That's a sitcom, right? That's like a
It's not
channel.
one I want to watch.
That's a Channel 4 sitcom right there. Or
Yeah, yeah,
just like
it's a dark one.
when a global pandemic shuts down the world, one man will move back in with his parents.
I certainly didn't take any comedy from it, but
I yeah yeah I've been trying to like the only funny COVID joke I think I came up with is that I one time said we have more COVID variants than we have TV shows set in Chicago right now, which is very U.S. specific. But
no, yeah. What's that guy's name? Dick Wolf, is it or?
yeah, yeah, Dick Wolf's the Law and Order guy, but I'm not sure who
Oh,
the
okay,
like.
but is there someone else who does all these Chicago? I know there's like Chicago PD, Chicago whatever fire or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't. I don't know who that guy is, but it was just tons of Chicago everything for a little while there. And so you started. And what job were you going to do in Japan? I'm curious.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been teaching English for a long, long time.
Oh
So
yeah.
I was going to work at a university there,
Oh
and
cool.
yeah, which would have been nice.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Japan has only just basically started letting people back in. It took more than 2 years, and they've started letting people back in, but I think you still need to wear a mask on the streets, which seems slightly crazy for us now.
Yeah. I mean, if they'll let me back in, I'll wear a mask the entire time because I like it. I like it over there so much. The other big thing I like about Japan is there is a very like healthy and vibrant like punk rock scene and pop punk scene,
Mm.
and I love that music. Um, so there's like a lot of like very young new bands that are doing music that I really like, which is kind of fun to explore. But yeah, I really want to see. I still need to see Kyoto. I want to see Hokkaido.
Oh,
I want to
yeah,
go all the way
definitely.
up north,
Mhm.
Okinawa, Hiroshima. I think it's. I want to see too. Like I need to see more of that place. Um,
I'd say the same. I mean, like I said, I lived there for 2 years. I've been to Kyoto, Osaka. That's about it. Kobe. I've been to hardly it just because there was so much going on anyway. I was like, Tokyo is a city of however many million. So
mhm.
because I was living there, I was kind of like, I've got quite a lot to do.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. But then that also seems like Spain. Like you come back to Spain a lot. So is it seems like Spain kind of holds a place for you as well.
I never planned to live in Spain, but I just ended up living here for a huge period of time.
Hmm.
It was like a series of X's basically, but
Ah.
I ended up I ended up just living in this country, but it's one of those weird things where you're like at the start I wasn't into the culture at all and I really
Hmm.
hated it. I didn't like Spain at all. I was like, "Oh, they're so family oriented." That it felt very different from Scotland and wasn't into it at all. Now I'm 41. I'm like, "Oh, thank God. Like this is perfect for me now."
Right.
I could live in small town Spain and be very, very happy.
Oh yeah. Like there's this. I bet it's like really kind of peaceful.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Totally.
Uh-huh. That's great because I loved Barcelona. I feel like Spain, like, and I feel this way about a lot of countries that are not the United States. They figured out like how to live. Like nobody's like killing themselves with their jobs, and no one is like there's none of this like working till like 7 or 8. Like it seems like the sort of like balance of like how to like exist and enjoy yourself and is really dialed in Spain.
I mean that's what I was saying earlier about like we're not there's not a huge pressure to to make lots and lots of money here.
Mm-hmm.
Because I always felt like when I met a lot of people who moved to Spain from the US and they were here for like 2 3 years and then they were like, well, need to go back and get a real job and make money. And there's definitely less of a pressure of that over here because as I said, you can just be a bum forever if you want to
Mm-hmm. There's kind of
and
systems in
survive.
place.
Yeah, yeah, we've got fail safes to make sure that you're sort of okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's just we I think we have that balance. I feel like the UK's pretty good for it as well because most people are like, I'm just working to live. Like I just need to make enough money so that I can get drunk at the weekend or watch Netflix every night or whatever it is. It's not people are not they don't it's not like they have these great things that they want to do with their life, but they're like we value our free time so much, I think. Which is
Mm-hmm.
also why our food is terrible because no one wants to spend time, they're like I don't want to cook because that's a waste of that'll take away from my Netflix time. So
Sure.
I just want to lie on the sofa and do nothing. I think that's what most people are into. So they're like, I'm not going to work very hard. I'm going to work hard enough to make enough money to survive potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
An odd sort of like it sounds so odd to my American ears to hear that, but there's something like very appealing to that. Like there's just and again, I also know that in Spain people live for Barcelona or Madrid or whatever their team is.
Yeah.
Um, so there's something kind of like it's like minimalist in a way, but I could see how. But it sounds so appealing. I have some days, and I know my wife has certainly days where she's like, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna throw it all away, and I'm just gonna like vanish, go off the grid. It sounds very appealing. And then I feel like for comedians, like that's very an amenable lifestyle to live
Yeah,
in.
definitely.
um, and so you started in 2014. So you're coming up on almost 10 years now as a stand up
Is it?
pretty soon. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you this. Cuz I'm assuming you've performed like in a lot of different countries. Is there something what's the next thing you want to do in stand up that you haven't done yet?
I mean, I don't do a huge amount of. I'm doing a show tonight. I don't do a huge amount of stand up these days. I think like a lot of
Mhm.
people, like especially during COVID, they were like, I was definitely not going to do Zoom shows. So
Right.
yeah, that I didn't really want to do that because I liked obviously like being in the place and having that
Mhm.
experience and so I don't do a huge amount of comedy. I think for me like stand up, the fun aspect of it is more or less what I already said of just playing with it, of just playing with things, of messing around.
Mhm.
I really like doing things like walking into the audience and things like that. I'm sure that
Uh-huh.
that wouldn't fly in most places. But yeah, I like just messing around. Also, I think I grew up in a time period where a lot of comedy was quite harsh. I don't want to say nasty per se, but definitely in as much as like making fun of people.
Uh-huh. Like aggressive. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know
slightly. I
exactly
mean
what you're
that
talking about.
because I think that's like a big. I felt like anytime I've been at a show in the U.S. or seen kind of shows in the U.S. or things like that, it's like hecklers are told like be quiet or get out. Whereas I think the UK culture was like hecklers have a voice and they're allowed to voice what they think, and then it's up to the stand up on stage to basically smash them, and that's it. It's like a
Uh-huh.
sort of back and forth of like someone throwing down the gauntlet and going like, all right, well. Whereas I felt in the US it was more like you're ruining the show.
Yes, that's generally how I think about hecklers. I mean, I very rarely do you get the the person who's just like completely set out to like destroy the show. Typically, a heckler is somebody who wants attention, and then it's I in that instance, it's the job to give them negative attention so that they shut up.
Mm.
But I sort of appreciate the sort of like gamesmanship of heckling in the UK. Like one of my favorite clips um, is Jimmy Carr. I think is really giving like some heckler uh, is like like shouts out something about his mom, and he's like, "Oh, because I actually talked to your mom before the show." And he gets up and like bends over and is as if he's like fucking his mom, and is like, "Oh, my son's coming to a gig tonight. He's a real cunt. He'll probably shout something out." And and then after he's done like giving into this guy, Jimmy Carr goes like, "Go on, give it another crack. I do this for a living. I love it." So,
Yeah, I think for someone like him as well, because you're accustomed to seeing him doing, really tightly written jokes. So
uh-huh.
to then see him sort of mess with someone just feels like, okay, well done. Well done, Jimmy.
Exactly. It's again, it's another part of it's shutting down hecklers is definitely it's part of the job, and it's a craft unto itself, but yeah, it's kind of cool to see him kind of step out of his normal mode of the very sharp one-liners. And again, like when I discovered him, I was like, "Oh my god, this dude's the best. I love this guy." Um uh so so yeah. I'm hip to what you're putting down. Like the pandemic has certainly made like the priority of going out every single night seem like a inherent risk. So I know what you mean. Like I try to be more calculating in my shows and where I go. I would love to be, and someone I also look up to a lot is Tom Rhodes. I've gotten
Okay.
to talk to him. He's
Hmm.
and he was an international like all over the place for years and
Yeah.
years and years. Um, is there is there a country you would love to go and perform stand up in?
It's actually funny that you mentioned Tom Rhodes because he's one of the people I spoke to just before I started comedy.
Uh huh.
And I messaged him back and forth quite a few times. He's always been he's really, really nice guy and like super
Yes, he
helpful.
is.
and yeah, he's willing to like talk to anyone, listen to anyone,
Mm-hmm.
which is very nice of him.
Yeah, he's
But
very nice.
yeah, I mean, he's been literally everywhere. He's done gigs literally everywhere. For me, I mean, I've done gigs in like some in New York and Berlin, which is a great city for comedy. I'd
Mm-hmm.
say after London, that's probably number 2 for English language comedy
Oh, nice.
for us
Cool.
for Europe, which is insane because obviously it's in Germany. But yeah, that's probably so. It probably goes to London, Berlin. I don't know what the third city is, but yes, I did gigs. I've done gigs in Berlin, Tokyo, a few other places. I don't know where I would. I don't know where I would like to do comedy. Is there somewhere that you'd recommend? What? Because you've obviously been around a bit.
I sure have. I liked Japan for sure, but I did some shows in Paris relatively
Oh
recently
yeah.
and this year, and had a really great time. The
Hmm.
English scene is not as is a little more underground compared to the French speaking
Yeah.
comedy scene. But there's a lot of very passionate people putting on very good shows, and I think you could probably get up like multiple times a week if you wanted to. I've met a lot of newer comics running shows. I've met a lot of uh, similar to you, like folks who like kind of jump around to different
Hmm.
countries. Um, yeah, so I really liked Paris quite a bit and found had some really good sets there. So I definitely recommend checking that Paris out.
I feel kind of bad about doing English language shows in these places. I mean, even here in Spain, we get like you'd get some people come to the show and they would be like, "Speak Spanish." And because there is like a slight element of that where we're like, we've set up a whole foreign language comedy network, like system of shows in your country.
Hmm.
And they're like, what is going on? Who are you people? Why are you doing this here?
Right, because there's clearly a market for it. I would do that. I mean, I when it comes to languages for me, I really have to like really work at it to get any sort of semblance
Mm,
of understanding. So what I would do, and I haven't tried this yet, is I would almost do like a double act. Like I would try to find someone who has a decent sense of public speaking or comic timing, who's bilingual, who could basically translate what I say on stage in real time, and we go on stage together, and I say a joke in English, and then he says something in the other language of the country I'm in, and then we kind of just go back and forth. I don't know how that could work, but it sounds like it could be either awful or a lot of fun.
yeah, yeah. I think it sounds like a good idea. At a certain point, it feels like you're just gonna get cut out though. They'll be like, I don't really care what that guy's saying in English. I just want to hear the translation. So we're not pay attention to him.
Yeah, I mean, as long as somebody is getting laughs, then that's fine with me.
That would be terrible if you're forcing someone else to bomb horribly.
Yeah, that sounds like, oh, you want
Gonna
to be
make you
on
bomb with my material.
Oh, or they could just like punch stuff up and I wouldn't even be none the wiser. They could
Yeah, absolutely.
or they could just make fun of me. They could just be like, he is so tall and Europe is not, we have not built doors for him. Uh,
I think that would, I mean, I could see that that would definitely be part of the set. That would, you'd obviously have to write that in, sort of messing with you,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah, we could play that out. I think it could be cool. Um, so let me before we close in here, is there anything else? Because it's been very nice getting to chat with you again, man. I've enjoyed this time.
Absolutely.
Um,
Thanks for having me.
yeah. So before we get into the plugs again, let me just kind of bring this full circle. So if you haven't been following the World Cup, how's Hibs been doing?
Terrible. Yeah, I noticed just before we started, you're wearing your Pure Hibs shirt. It's
I
just
am,
one of the
yes.
football teams from Edinburgh. Well, actually, it's really the only football team from Edinburgh. There's another team called Hearts, but we try not to talk about them.
Sure.
Things are terrible. We're sort of melting down. The
Oh no.
manager's not great. The owner's from the US actually, and he's put some money into the club,
Mm-hmm.
but there's just horrible problems, and we're in free fall, and we're going down the table, and we've
Oh
lost a bunch of
no.
players, got injured. We're going to sell one of our best players in January probably. and might get relegated. So it's pretty much business as usual for us.
Oh, I'm so sorry because I remember because I started following them after we hung out and I
Oh,
like
so you're responsible for all this.
well I started following once they got promoted, some bandwagoning.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's I'm so sorry to hear that, man. I hope that I hope that these problems can be addressed, and if you do go down, I hope you pop right back up.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect so. We've got pretty. I mean, we get like 20,000 people. No, that's lies. There's no way we get 20,000 for the matches. We probably get about 16,000,
Mm-hmm.
which for Scotland is not bad. I think we're probably like fourth or fifth in terms of like highest crowds.
Sure.
So like we're able to generate money. So we should never be the things we should be doing better than we are. This is the mad part. We've got like we have some okay players and we've got some money
Uh huh.
and we've got people who want to turn up and watch a good team. It just never happens.
Oh
It's
man,
tough.
that
It's very hard.
that is. But there's I'm trying to find some silver lining here. I see. Well, I also just appreciate the fandom culture of football because it's not like it's not like, oh, Hibs aren't good, I'm gonna go follow a better team, or like I'm gonna follow Celtic or Rangers or whatever. It's like,
No.
no, this is the
You
team.
can't do that.
This
You
is
can't do
the
that.
team. I'm gonna stick with it.
You can you can change your family, but you can't change your football team.
That is very true. I have a bunch of very dear friends in Buenos Aires, and in Argentina. The big teams are of course River and Boca
Right.
Juniors, and he's a fan of a team called Vélez Sarsfield, and I remember he told me this story about when his son was like 6 or 7. He said, "Dad, I want to become a Boca Juniors fan," and then he sits him down and is like, "Son, you can't pick your family, and you can't pick your team. We are a Vélez family." And then he was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay."
See, I would, as I said, I would go further than that. I think you can definitely get rid of your family, but the football team is it's in your blood. There's nothing you can do about it. There always were, like growing up, there was always some weird kid who would switch from like Hearts to Rangers or something like that. I just
Mm-hmm.
because you know, there's just nothing to be said for these people. They're just awful, awful human beings. You have to stick with it. I'm sorry, it is what it is.
I agree. That's why what I've always appreciated about the passion for football fans overseas, or
Yeah.
is the like, we will go down. I will follow this team in when they get relegated out of the football league, and they are a semi-professional team. I appreciate that. Well, dude, this has been great. It's been lovely getting to catch up with you again,
Absolutely.
Andy. Is there anything we can promote before we get out here?
Yeah, I host a movie podcast. It's called Call It Friendo.
Excellent. And how long have you been doing that?
Ooh, about 2 years, just over 2 years. It's me and a comedian friend of mine, Donica Tiernan, who lives here in Barcelona, and we basically like we watch old movies that we've never seen before. We're both kind of massive film nerds, and we've seen
Mm-hmm.
everything. So we set up a thing to force us to watch stuff that we never seen before.
Oh,
And
that sounds cool.
yeah, so we're basically going through a ton of stuff that probably no one should ever watch.
Nice. And what's like a classic that you both had to go back that you'd never seen that you would expect people to who you would have seen?
Would have seen, or yeah, I don't think there's anything that was like, oh, you've never seen The Godfather before. No, like both of us have watched a ton of movies, like a crazy amount.
Mm.
So like I don't think there was anything where we both hadn't seen something, that everyone has seen. But I think in the US, my experience of like being in the US and in general talking to people from the US is like you've got more of a sense of that culture of like films, of like knowing the names of actors and actresses and going like, I know the name of that screenwriter and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think for Europeans, that's a bit weird. So we're sort of weirdos here. That's one of the reasons why we're weirdos. But yeah, I think in general, like in the US, you value that culture more.
Yeah, of like who go the behind the scenes folks and like the
Yeah, of like this
directors.
guy made this movie with this guy, and then they worked on this other project with this other guy. Yeah, all that.
Oh yeah, like I get into that stuff as well, because especially like if you're watching a movie and you're like, wow, the dialogue is really really good. I want to find out who wrote this, and then you get into like that's why Aaron Sorkin's so popular
Right.
and what have you. Yeah, absolutely. Or like, oh, Shawshank Redemption. What else has that director made? I bet I would also like other things
Frank Darabont.
he has made. That's my favorite movie of all time, still to this day. But that's very cool. I will give that I'll give that a listen. If you ever need a guest host, hit me up. We'll make that happen.
Solid. Yeah, call it friendo.
Call
it's
it friendo.
Everywhere.
Excellent. And thanks for talking to me, Andy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Will.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is Andy J Ritchie from coming from Barcelona, Spain, originally via Edinburgh. Check out his podcast, Call It Friendo, everywhere you get your podcasts. I love chatting with Andy. I hope I get to spend more time with him in the future and get back over to Scotland, because I had a great time when I was there the last time, and I want to come and perform at the Fringe Festival, be it Free Fringe, in any capacity. I want to do it. So thank you, folks, so much for being here and enjoying this podcast. If you know a friend who would be interested in listening to this podcast, you think, you can send them to awesomedisaster.com. That has links to everywhere you can get your podcasts. If I can ask you guys a favor, if you listen to this on Apple Podcasts, you can leave us a 5-star rating and a review. That helps other folks find the show as well. You can also give us a follow on Stitcher or Spotify. That helps other people know that this is a good show and the algorithm worth their time and consideration. And you can find all my social media there at WillCarey23 on Instagram, at Comic Will Carey on Twitter, and at Will Carey on Mastodon and Hive. I'm going to go in, try to get in early on some of these Twitter alternatives and see what happens of it. If nothing, then we'll just chalk it up to experience. So at Will Carey on Hive and at Will Carey on Mastodon as well. If you want to go a little bit further in supporting the show, you can go to our merch shop as well as our Patreon, which is patreon.com/awesomedisaster. Get stuff that is not available anywhere else, and you'll be supporting me in the meantime as well. And again, I have some really cool merch designs at the shop as well. All links are at awesomedisaster.com. I hope you're gearing up for the December holidays, be it Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa. I know I'll be celebrating Hanukkah and Christmas, and looking forward to spending a nice Hanukkah meal with some of my dearest and closest friends, and doing some backdoor barbecue shows with the sketch group I work with at the beginning of December as well. So thank you all again for supporting me and what I do, and for listening to this show. And I will see you next time between Awesome and Disaster. Stay safe, wear a mask when needed, get vaxxed and boosted, and stomp out fascism. Take care, everybody.